Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I am your host, Katherine Becker. On this podcast, we talk to all different kinds of people, from real estate investors to entrepreneurs to corporate executives. You name it, we want to talk to them because we want to learn what they have learned in their career that has made them success. After all, this is the good, bad, and the ugly, so we cover it all. Because while a smart person learns from their mistakes, a genius learns from the mistakes of others. So we want to know what other people have gone through so we can either avoid the mistakes completely or we can learn to fail faster. We're taking a little bit of a different turn on this episode. You guys know I like to keep you on your toes. I have the pleasure of introducing you to Jaymes Buckman, who is a poet, a performer, and the frontman of the sparkliest rock and roll band in the galaxy called Hot Apollo. Jaymes, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. By the way, the thing you said about mistakes, my thing is learning from the mistakes of others, but making mistakes that are entirely unique to me. So I don't know where that places me in the sort of spectrum of
Well,
your philosophy.
we just like to say that there's a learning in everything. No one's ever really failed until they quit. So if you can learn from your mistakes, if you can learn from other mistakes, it's all about the journey and what we can learn from one another.
Well, one thing I'll never do is quit. I'm far too stubborn for that. And someone say that's a mistake in itself, but I go ahead anyway because again, stubborn.
Well, and it's a tough balance between persistence and insanity, right? Because insanity
I
is
like a
doing
bit of
the
both.
same it's insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, where, persistence is never giving up, always doing the same thing. So it's a fine line to walk. Well, tell us a little bit more about you, Jaymes.
Where do you like to start?
Well, I mean, when did you first say, hey, I am going to be the front man in a rock and roll band? Like, how did that come about?
I think it was almost instinctual. Like I've always loved performing, and I've always felt like a knack for like writing, specifically like lyrics, poems, that sort of thing. Those were like my two of my biggest like delights, even like in early childhood. Um, and like at the back of my mind, like the idea of being in a rock band always held like some appeal. And it like, would flit around the different areas of my brain over the course of my childhood. Then, like around like middle school and high school age, uh, basically like most of my friends were starting bands, like I like playing guitar or whatever, and they knew that I wrote. They liked the way I wrote. They liked my lyrics and stuff. They didn't like my voice, so they didn't want to let me sing. But they knew I had a drum kit because I played percussion in music class, and so I could at least keep a beat, even if I wasn't like amazing on the drums. I wasn't. I was a pretty mediocre drummer, but I could keep a beat, and I had a drum kit, and they liked my lyrics. So that is how my early musical experience started. But then I realized that I was the only one in the band who really like had any drive towards like making a band work. The rest of them just wanted to, jam on the same old songs for like hours in the basement and not actually do bad things like writing our own songs and playing shows and all that, right?
Well, and
So
it's a really good analogy of a band and a business, because you all have to come together with a common vision to execute. And when you're live, like, out there on a stage, there's not a place to go, stop that, I messed up, we got to go back and do it again. Like, you're all in it together, you all have your separate roles, and what music you're playing and how you come together to create something completely different. And that's very similar for a lot of organizations. And I think a lot of organizations struggle with how they can get the best out of their employees and make sure that everyone is kind of, carrying their weight equally. So is that something that you've had to experience in your career?
yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like I've even back then, like from then till now, I've had the like pleasure of playing with so many brilliant musicians, but that's just made me realize that musicianship is nowhere near like all of what it takes. Like there's a difference between someone who's a good player and a good band member. And at this point in my life, I am so elated to be in a band with people who are like full members of a band. Like their souls are in it. They're like fingers and hands are in it too, but like their spirits are aligned with the vision of Hot Apollo. And it's after those shaky beginnings in high school, it's so nice to have those people in my life on this journey with me.
So what are some of the differences between being a good musician and being a good band member?
I would say you talked about vision, and I'd say like being on board with that vision and having the capacity to uh, do what it takes to see that through. Because like everyone, most people, I would say, get into music because they enjoy playing music. Um, but unfortunately, there's so much more to being in a band, and then not every element of it is like as pleasurable in the moment. Like there's like it is, the show business is a business and the show is the fun part, but you do have to do like the rest of the things to prepare. And those are like, practicing, like, I mean, some people like don't even want to practice like songs by themselves, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, like some people, are willing to like jam, once a week or whatever, but then they'll like, go home and like basically forget about it until the next practice. And what that's not really conducive to being a part of a band.
And it's really similar to being an entrepreneur. I mean, you are an entrepreneur, and how the IRS determines, whether you're an entrepreneur or a hobbyist. It seems very similar to whether you just like to jam out and play music, here and there for fun, or whether it's, your true passion in life's work and it's how you make a living.
I would say if we just go by the IRS and like making a living, I would say like at least 99% of musicians would be considered hobbyists in that classification system. But I take your point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not actually in America. You're in Toronto.
Yes, I don't know what our tax agency is called. Uh, I don't pay that much attention to that side of things, as that is the sort of thing that goes out of my mind as soon as I'm not thinking about it.
But
So
surely it's something you need to pay attention to as you run your business in the facet of making music and running a band and having the show business part.
yes,
Um,
in the moment, yes, but also like that's what accountants are for.
so you have to
You
force
know,
yourself to pay attention and focus on that.
yeah, no idea. That's like the thing. It's like in the moment I can like dot down and like do like what I need to do to like get it out of the way. But yeah, it's not. I'm not ahead with numbers in it. I'm not a numbers guy. My drummer is, and that's part of what I like about being in band with him. Like the different ways our brains work, and like as a drummer, like there's like a huge benefit to having that guy's mind work in a very like structured fashion. Like
Mm.
he's the one, like the rest of us are like tend to like play our songs by feel, and he's the one who likes to like chart everything out. And like, all right, uh, we have like 4 bars of this section and then like 8 bars of this next section. Like the rest of us don't naturally think in bars in the way he does, in that sort of like very rigid order. And it's a delight to like have that perspective in the band too. It makes us more well rounded.
So, I mean, a huge part of being in a band is branding and marketing, right? If people don't know about you, they don't know how to find you and find your music. So, how do you approach that piece? And what are some of the things that you do um, to support yourself in that way?
Some of it is actually just natural. Like as I'm just like walking along, like in daily life, people will stop me to like talk about the way I look, for instance, and they'll ask me like inevitably like what I do, and very fast they will learn about my band because that is like one of the first things I am wanting to talk about. Like generally I'd say like within like minutes of meeting me, the average person will know that I'm the singer of this band, and I'll be able to point them towards hearing it because it is good music I want to share with everyone. That
Yeah.
is just like my natural inclination, but it also does serve a purpose beyond that. So I feel as though uh, I am just naturally suited to being a frontman on stage and off stage. It's just something I live and breathe, and people feel that very fast.
And for the people who are listening to this, through a podcast platform. How would you describe your look?
Uh, Sparkly and blue.
So you have very electric blue hair and it's quite long. So it's definitely a look. Have you experimented with other looks and how do you kind of feel that, or do you keep like this as your signature look?
For a while I was like platinum blonde, like almost like silvery white with like highlights. Um, I've the length has gone up and down. Uh, like my previous look was I remember like a few like yeah probably yeah a couple years ago, one of my band members talked about getting a haircut and he called it Jaymes Buckman, which at the time in his mind when he met me it was like a very short like undercut.
Mm.
And my thing is like there are a lot of short hairstyles I really like and there are a lot of long hairstyles I really like, and like there's always a part of me that like wants to switch, but I know that as soon as I cut my hair, it won't be long before I want to grow it out again. And it takes so long to grow hair that I just don't want to go through that. So it's like I have to lean along the like path that isn't going to take 3 years to recover from.
I think all girls can relate to that too.
Yeah. And like, you know what, if you want to get like a sort of short vibe, you can just put it up in a little bun or whatever and get a bit of that like illusion. Um, but yeah, just it's cutting my hair again just is not in the cards right now.
Which I mean, there's something to having a signature look. I mean, like you think about, I mean, even just like 80s hair bands, like they all that was the signature look. Like we can all probably name like five different hair bands from the 80s just based on that description alone. And so there is something to wanting to stand out and make sure that you're, um, have something that you're known for, so that when people recognize you and have, able to create that kind of buzz and add to the branding of it.
Yeah, well, see, my thing is, I mean, I definitely got into like hair bands in a big way, like around like middle school. So I do still like a lot of that. But like I'd say there are some of them that was just how they like to present. That was like their most authentic way of expressing themselves, and some of them were just doing it because it was a trend, and that's fine too. Me, like I, even if I weren't in a rock band, I would present in the exact same way. Like I just dress to express. Like it's just another form of self-expression for me. And like, I just like my exterior to match my soul. Um, Fortunately, that uh, attracts the type of attention one wants as a member, and the face of a rock band. So it worked out very nicely. Also, I feel as though there are a lot of people who probably think, I think people say this, they they might think I look weird in most facets of daily life, but then I hop on stage and to even the most like basic straightest type of mind, uh I look appropriate, so
Yeah.
I do think that I was like destined for this life from the jump.
It's like there's like a quote like dress for the job you want. And you embody the job that you want, which is pretty perfect.
Exactly. Yeah, I almost have like yeah it is there's kind of almost no choice in that. I was like guided towards this anyway.
So you must have grown up being very creative and very into the arts. Do you feel like there's like do you have a muse or something that helps you to come up with different ideas? Because I feel like everyone is creative. We all have different ways of expressing our creativity. And I think that there's a lot of people who've lost their creativity along the way. So I'm curious what your thoughts are around that.
So I would start. I would say I'm my own muse. I tend to inspire myself most often. Um, but I just it's funny how the way you phrased that second bit, because I feel as though uh, my parents basically modeled both versions of that.
Hmm.
Um, my like both of my parents were like professional doctors, but my father had more of a like well-rounded way of living his life in some respects, not in others. He was not always the most practical person, but he really indulged his artistic side. He never let that go away. He always loved writing. performing, and that was like those were side hustles for him that became more prominent as he grew older.
Mm.
Whereas my mother was always on the single track of medicine, and I was always able to tell, and that she still had a creative spark within her, but it was something she suppressed for most of her life. She's approaching retirement now, and I have a feeling she's going to take up painting or something in the next year or two at most, because that is a part of her that is just always been bursting at the seams. And I think that's probably part of what attracted my father to her in the first place, if I had to guess. Um, but yeah, it's a very different. Yeah, both of them were very creative people, but one of them lived it, and the other seemed to do everything in her power to uh, keep it buried most often.
It's interesting to think about, and it's great that you had the example of the two of them in contrasting in that way, because so we spend so much time with our parents. Like there's such huge influences on our lives and how we think about things, and sometimes it's hard to find our own path and adopting our own thoughts because we're not sure what are our thoughts and what are thoughts that were given to us from our families. So I'm curious, especially now, hearing that both of your parents are doctors, on how that conversation went when you're like, "Mom, Dad, I'm going to be a musician," or did they just already know the whole time?
So I think they basically already knew, but and they were always very encouraging, and so like I feel as though that's one of the biggest factors in how someone's creativity manifests, and to what extent, to what obviousness. The encouragement, being surrounded by people who encourage you to pursue what you're about, is crucial. um you want that kind of energy in your life, and I was so blessed to have parents who were supportive in every conceivable way. However, my father, by dint of having more experience in the artistic world, knew that it wasn't a straight shot to material success, you know? Whereas I think my mother, by dint of only really surrounding herself with people who had achieved a certain status in the world through various means, had only really experienced or been aware of artists who had made it in the
Mm,
sort of financial sense, at least, right? So and also the only job she'd had first-hand experience with was that of a medical professional, and so that meant that she'd only seen firsthand the perils and tribulations of that job without being exposed to those of any other. So she said, "James, I don't want you to have to go through all the nonsense I had to go through as a doctor. So unless you really want to be a doctor, don't be a doctor. But you have an artistic side, so pursue that." And then it was a while before she realized that uh, the arts are fraught with their own pitfalls, you know?
yeah.
But by that point, it's far too late. Far too late.
But that's also a good point, in that in any job that you do, anything, um, there's always going to be issues. I mean, you think about, why is it okay? Like, why is a society, do we accept that it's really hard to be a doctor, that there's going to be years and years and years of learning and practicing, and then that's okay because I guess they get paid at the end well, that we're all okay with it, and not thinking that there's other positions out there, being an artist, being a musician, where you're struggling so much as well, but still in pursuit of your passion, and your drive, that's maybe not as socially acceptable. What do you think?
I think if you're talking about mass society, that has some merit to it. But I also think that on the flip side, people do like the romantic idea of striving for a nigh impossible dream,
Yeah.
and that is more focused on artists. I don't think that like people attach the same level of romance to the medical student who gets 3 hours of sleep on a good night,
Right.
and that's also very realistic. They have a more deterministic outcome at the end of that. A lot of artists, you know, uh, never get out of the starving stage. Um, Whereas most doctors who see it through get some sort of job. Um, so I think society in the abstract is accepting of both, but I think on a personal level, there might be fewer people who want to actually deal with artists in their own lives.
Hmm. So what does success look like for you?
I mean, I want to be uh, the biggest rock band in the universe, ideally. But honestly, like there is a level of contentment that can be achieved just from having the freedom to keep making my art, keep performing, keep putting it out there, you know? And that's currently where I am. And that doesn't suck, honestly, you
So
know?
is
So
there
I
some
think
sort of
there,
is there like a milestone where you'll be like, okay, I made it to whatever that peak is? And sure, there'll be more to climb, but is there something in your mind where you're like, this is when I've made it?
so I don't know. I'm not, I try to not to place too much emphasis on like any sort of end game, um, to the point where it might just detract from the joys of the journey. But I will say that I do have, I seem to have just hit some sort of milestone. Um, on November 18th, I'm opening up for a legendary Canadian band for the first time. This band called Anvil, and I just remember like when I was a kid, there was like a documentary about them, and now I get to open up for their Toronto show, and I'm like excited. They're the biggest band I've ever played with, so that feels like a bit of a milestone. That feels
That's
like
huge.
the next level. Yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah.
Oh my
I
gosh. How did that even like happen? Like, how did you even like, do you have like agents that like set this up for you? Or how did you even have that conversation to be in this
so
place?
no, so currently I'm managing basically all aspects of the band. I like most agents don't want to work on commission, and we don't have much of a budget for anything outside of the music right now, like that type of thing. So like I don't really have the budget to like hire a team, like a dedicated team like that right now. Uh, so I handle all that. But I was playing. The band was playing a show for Pride weekend at this club called the Rock Pile in Toronto, and they liked us so much they invited us back because they get some fairly big touring acts in there too. Like I think like the Misfits just played there a few months ago,
Nice.
for instance. So yeah, they get some big acts, and they said no, Anvil's opening up. Anvil's playing a show here in November. Like you guys should come back then. And so yeah, we said like I just talked to the manager, like he talked to me, and we set it up like that. So at this stage, like everything is done. Like I'm the main point of connection for all of that.
What I
So yeah,
mean,
if anyone wants to organize shows with me, like I'm the person to reach out to.
well, that's great to know because there have been several guests from Toronto specifically that have been on this podcast. So you never know what things could come from it. I mean, like, is there a specific like stadium or venue that would just be a dream for you to play at?
There are a few. I'd say the first one of the places I most want to visit is Tokyo, but I hate sitting still. So the idea of being trapped on a plane for upwards of 18 hours without even like it'd be nice if like planes had gyms on them. That would take the edge off, I think. But I think maybe the President's does and the Rocks does, and that's about it. So unless one of them is like willing to fly me there, I would need a very good reason to go to Tokyo. And playing the show there would be awesome. Um, I think they dig us because glam rock is still kind of a thing there in a bigger way, and I think they dig our vibe. Um,
I think
also
I could see that as well. I could definitely see Tokyo for you.
also playing a venue that's not actually like a venue would really be cool. I remember going on a trip to Rome when I was a kid and like standing in the middle of the Colosseum and thinking it'd be so cool to play here, or like in like a pyramid or like some ancient like Mayan temple, you know? Like I think that would be really cool. Just like that would we'd have to do it, respectfully. I don't know if that such a thing is even possible. If you're talking about like dream concerts, something
Sure.
like
I
that.
mean, yeah, we put it out there. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know. So as we're kind of wrapping things up, we've talked a little bit about the good, a little bit about the bad. What is some of the ugly that you've had to experience in your career, and how did you overcome it?
I suppose I don't like to like kind of keep the ugly in my mind, but sometimes eh, you know how you can be in a relationship and neither of you is a bad person, neither of you is toxic inherently, but the meeting of certain elements can create some noxiousness in the same way that like hydrogen by itself is fine to have around, oxygen by itself. Wait, I'm bad at science. Um,
But
those
I
are
get
probably
your
not.
meaning. But like you can think of
Sometimes,
it like
sometimes,
with salt, sodium and chloride. Like sodium by itself is really reactive. Chlorine by itself is really reactive. But you put them together and we can eat it just fine.
yeah, or the opposite, where two elements that are fine by themselves can create an explosion.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say some relationships are like that, and band relationships are no exception. And sometimes, you'll play with a perfectly lovely musician, and you'll realize that your visions diverged at a certain point, and need to go your separate ways. And there can be um, moments at least where that is not extremely civil. I remember this. I won't mention any names, but I just remember this one guy. He's the sweetest guy, and we played together for about a month. But he had a new job that was becoming increasingly demanding. He was passionate about that too. To his credit, he was a businessman of some sort, and he said, Jaymes, we played a few shows together. I just want to let you know, for the next 3 weeks, I will be in China on a business trip. But as soon as I get back, I'm all yours. Um, and I said, you know what? Thank you for letting me know ahead of time, so that we can avoid any scheduling conflicts. Cool. Excited to have you back when you're back. Until then, and have a good trip. Um, and then he came back and said, James, I'm excited to play with you again. Just want to let you know, I just got told that for like the next 3 months of the next year, I'm going to be in China on another business trip. And I said, are you all right? Love that for you, but are you sure that you really have the bandwidth like commit to this band too? Because it doesn't seem as though you can do both things. Um, and then he like started like shouting at me like, "How dare you! I've clearly demonstrated that I love this band and I'm an amazing guitarist. Uh, and I can't believe that you're saying this to me." And then he called me back on the following morning and said, "Yeah, James, sorry, I got a bit defensive yesterday. But yeah, I thought about it, and you're right. I don't have the lifestyle that's going to be conducive to being a proper member of this band. Sorry, but and he's still a cool guy, still a great guitarist. But sometimes, like especially with artistic temperaments, moments like that can happen, and I'd say that would be the sort of ugly I've seen here and there.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that with hiring people. That, sometimes people are great in interviews, things are great in the beginning, and then sometimes it just doesn't work out. So it's really important to have those crucial conversations and be able to voice that in a way instead of letting it linger. And then, both being disappointed down the road. So I appreciate that very much. Well, this has been a great. So please give final word to you. Please let the people know where they can find your music. We do have listeners all over the world. So thankfully, you've got a lot of stuff online. And then for the local people, let them know what you got going on.
All right, so yes, we are Hot Apollo, which means you can search for us anywhere on the internet and find us under that name. iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Bandcamp, wherever you listen to music. We have a bunch of music videos in addition to a few albums and a bunch of singles. Also social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, even I think Tumblr. Oh, TikTok, even always at a Hot Apollo. If you want to reach out to me, any of those avenues, my email's just hotapollo@rocketmail.com if that's the thing you like doing. We have a website with links to all of our stuff and some cool merchandise. We just got some new stuff in hotapollo.com. So yeah, very easy to find. And yeah, and yeah, November 18th, uh, at the Rock Pile, opening for Anvil. It's going to be an awesome Saturday night. And for your listeners, if you reach out to me directly, I'll even give you a discount on tickets.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Thank you. That's so
yeah,
generous.
yeah, it's gonna be awesome. So just yeah, message me and I'll hook you up.
And be like, yeah, I heard this on The Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for being on this podcast and sharing all of your insights into this. I think what I really took away from this is you are an incredibly intelligent individual, and you're so well spoken, which I think really obviously goes to the fact of being a poet and a lyricist and a performer. But you're incredibly intelligent, and I think that I'm really glad that we had this opportunity to showcase that to you instead of maybe your stage antics, because that's when you're putting on a show.
yeah. I mean, you can see that too. That's another natural part of me. I'd say, yeah, intelligence and antics are like two of my top attributes. But yeah, the antics are online to exhaustion. You can see those anywhere. As I said, we have some music videos if you want to see antics.
Perfect. Well, to the
Yeah,
listeners, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your audience so we can continue to bring more amazing guests and learn what they have learned. If there's anything that you're curious about, maybe it's a person, a topic, a profession, or an industry, please reach out and I'd be happy to find a great guest for you. Until next time, everyone, take care.